Democratic Senator Chris Coons of Delaware. He serves on that committee. He will be questioning Comey. Senator, thanks for being here.
Thank you, Allison.
What did you think of Hillary Clinton's assessment there, that were it not for the letter that Director Comey sent to Congress on October 28th, outlining what he thought might have been new material on Anthony Weiner's laptop, that she would have won the election?
Well, it's certainly striking that at the time there were ongoing investigations against both candidate Trump and candidate Clinton, and that the FBI director chose to comment on one, but not to comment on the other. And I am interested in hearing from the FBI director what lessons he's learned from the consequences of that decision. I'm less interested really in relitigating the 2016 election than I am in figuring out how we secure our next elections from foreign interference, and what lessons the FBI director and the FBI as an organization has learned about the deviations from their historic practice of not making comments on investigations, particularly those that are explosive so close to an election.
So will you ask him this morning directly if he thinks that his letter was to blame for the Hillary Clinton's loss?
Well, I'm confident that question will be asked, Allison. I'm one of the more junior members of the committee. By the time it gets to me, I suspect that question will have been asked 4 or 5 times. I will ask him about why he chose to comment on one and not the other, and in particular, how he sees the future of the FBI and what they're going to learn from the impact it had. Look, Allison, in an election that was as close as 2016, there's lots of different factors that determine the outcome, and I don't think it's possible to point to one specific thing and say, this determined the outcome of the election. There were just 160,000 votes across 3 states that ultimately determined the outcome. And Hillary Clinton did win the popular vote by 3 million votes. But it's important for us to understand why the current FBI director chose to insert himself in the last days of the election in the way he did.
Look, you don't get much time questioning him. So what is the burning question that when it comes to your turn that you want to ask him?
Well, as I said, Allison, what I want to ask him will probably have already been asked several times. What I would ask if I were the first questioner, why did you choose not to comment on the ongoing investigation into candidate Trump and potential collusion with Russia, but you did choose to comment in the waning days of the election on what you thought might be new evidence? This difference in how you treated one candidate, one campaign versus the other is pretty striking. And what lessons have you and the FBI learned about that impact on the election?
All right, let me ask you about something else that's going on Capitol Hill, and that's the budget deal that was just agreed on that does fund the government, keeps it open through September. The White House thinks that you Democrats, are spiking the ball, and they are not happy about what your response has been. Let me just play for you OMB Director Mick Mulvaney talking about this.
What they really didn't get is this, and this is what they wanted. They wanted a shutdown. We know that. They were desperate to make this administration look like we couldn't function, like we couldn't govern. I don't anticipate a shutdown in September, but if negotiations, if the Democrats aren't going to behave any better than they have in the last couple of days, it may be inevitable.
What's your response to that, Senator?
I'm sorry. That's pretty hard to square with reality. President Trump is the one who actually tweeted earlier this week that the government needs a good shutdown in September. I don't think there's any Democrat who wanted a shutdown. What we wanted is what we got, which was a good, balanced, bipartisan negotiation where the Senate Republicans and Democrats worked together to keep the government functioning. There's no funding for a big new wall that the president wanted and insisted on, but that both Republicans and Democrats didn't see the wisdom in funding. There's no cutoff of funding to Planned Parenthood. I'm personally thrilled that there's $860 million in new money invested in fighting opioid addiction, a terrible scourge that's affecting every state in the country. And I'm encouraged that we're continuing to invest in medical research. So I frankly think the president ought to be taking a victory lap and saying that he played a role in getting a great deal done instead of having his OMB director wag his finger at Democrats and say that we somehow were lusting after a shutdown. I just think it's silly.
Well, on the topic of that border wall, they also say that you got it wrong, that in fact, you Democrats did approve money for border security, and they are using that to beef up the wall.
We did approve money for border security. It is expressly not for the construction of a 2,000-mile new wall. And frankly, I think we're dithering here. We did pass a big bipartisan immigration reform bill here 2 years ago that I voted for that would have invested in upgrading border security. It did not fund, nor did this New Deal fund, building a 2,000-mile big, beautiful wall, as President Trump talked about in his campaign. President Trump threatened to veto this deal if it didn't include his vision of a border wall. It doesn't include his vision of a border wall. We'll see if he vetoes it. I don't think he will.
Senator Chris Coons, thank you very much for being on New Day.
Thank you, Allison.
Chris.
All right, there is confusion and outrage